Hello, my wonderful friend. Welcome back to Super English Talks, the place where we don't just study English, we grow as people while learning it. I'm so happy you're here with me today because we're going to talk about something really interesting, something that can change the way you learn and even the way you live your life. The topic is metacognition. Now, I know that word might sound a little big or confusing. You probably don't hear it every day, right? But don't worry. By the time we finish this lesson, you'll understand exactly what it means. And not only that, you'll see how metacognition can help you in learning English, in making decisions, and even in your personal growth. So, let's start simple. What is metacognition? It basically means thinking about your thinking. That's it. Imagine you step outside of your own mind and watch your thoughts, almost like you're watching a movie about your brain. You're not just doing something, you're also noticing how and why you're doing it. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're studying English vocabulary. One way is to just read the words again and again. But if you don't think about how you actually remember best, you might forget them quickly. Now, if you stop for a moment and ask yourself, do I remember better when I write the words down? Or when I say them out loud? Or maybe when I use flashcards? That's metacognition. You're not only learning, you're thinking about how you learn. You're learning how to learn. Why is this so important? Because most of us go through life on autopilot. We repeat the same actions, we make the same mistakes, and sometimes we don't even know why. But when you use metacognition, you become aware of your patterns. You can change them. You can choose better strategies. You can react less and respond more thoughtfully. Metacognition creates a little pause between what happens to you and how you react to it. And in that pause, you can ask powerful questions like, why am I feeling this way? Is this belief I have really true? Is there another way to see this situation? Just asking those questions starts to change your thinking. This is especially important if you're learning English. Maybe you've had times when you wanted to speak, but you felt shy or nervous. Maybe you got stuck and couldn't find the words. Metacognition helps you notice what's happening in those moments, reflect on it, and then try a new approach. It reminds you that you're not only learning English, you're also learning how you learn. So today we're going to dive deeper into this idea. We'll explore what metacognition really means, how it shows up in daily life, and simple ways you can practice it. By the end, you'll see how it can make you a more confident learner, a better thinker, and even a stronger person overall. But before we go deeper, let's take a closer look at the word itself. Metacognition comes from two parts, meta and cognition. When we understand the roots of a word, we can understand it more deeply. And in this case, knowing the roots makes the meaning so much clearer. So let's break it down together. Let's start with the word cognition. This word comes from Latin. In Latin, there's a word cognoscere, which means to know or to understand. So when we say cognition, we are really talking about all the processes in the mind that help us know and understand things. Cognition is everything your brain does when it is working. For example, when you solve a problem, that's cognition. When you make a decision, that's cognition. When you learn something new, that's cognition. When you remember something, that's cognition. Even when you understand language, that's cognition too. So in simple words, cognition is the way your brain operates in the world. It's your mind in action. Now, let's look at the first part, meta. This comes from Greek, and it means beyond, above, or about. So, when we put the two parts together, meta and cognition, we get something like beyond thinking or about thinking. In other words, metacognition means thinking about your own thinking. I know that can sound a little strange at first. You might be asking, wait, you want me to think about my thinking? And yes, that's exactly what it is. Metacognition is like taking one step back and watching your own brain. Not with your eyes, of course, but with your awareness. Imagine you are holding up a mirror, but not in front of your face, in front of your mind. You look at what is happening inside your head. Here's a picture to help you imagine it. Think of yourself walking in a forest. When you're on the ground, you only see the trees right in front of you. That's like your normal thinking. But now imagine you rise up in a hot air balloon. From up above, you can see much more. The trees, the rivers, the paths where you came from, and where you might go. That view from above is like metacognition. You're not just stuck inside your thoughts. You're looking at them from a higher place with a bigger perspective. Let me give you a very real, everyday example. Imagine you're reading something in English. Suddenly, you realize your mind has wandered. Maybe you've read the same sentence 3 times, but you didn't really understand it. Has that ever happened to you? I know it has happened to me many times. Now, if you just keep reading without noticing, you won't learn very much. But if you stop and say, "Wait, I'm not focusing. I need to slow down and read again," that is metacognition. You are noticing what your brain is doing and you are taking control. Another way to see it is like this. You are not only the player on the field, you are also the coach of your mind. The coach doesn't run around kicking the ball, but watches the game from the side. The coach notices what's working, what's not, and says, maybe we need a new strategy. That's exactly what metacognition does. And here's the key point. A good coach doesn't judge harshly. A good coach doesn't say, "You're terrible." Instead, they observe, they reflect, and they adjust. That's how you should treat your own mind, with curiosity, not with judgment. In fact, most of us already use metacognition without realizing it. For example, when you ask yourself, "Did I really understand what I just read?" That's metacognition. When you say, "This is difficult for me. Maybe I should try another way," that's metacognition too. It shows up in small daily moments, when you are learning, when you are making choices, even when you are having conversations. Another way to describe it is this. Metacognition is like mental self-awareness. Just like emotional intelligence helps us notice and understand our feelings, metacognition helps us notice and understand our thinking. And the beautiful thing is, when you start noticing your thinking, you gain more power. You can pause. You can reflect. And you can say, sometimes metacognition is as simple as asking yourself small but powerful questions like, wait, is this the best way to handle this? Am I being fair to myself right now? Why do I keep telling myself I can't do this? But let's pause here, because there's something important I need to make clear. Metacognition is not the same as overthinking. A lot of people confuse the two. Overthinking means your mind goes in circles. You worry about everything, you repeat the same thoughts, and you never take action. That can feel stressful and exhausting. Metacognition, on the other hand, is different. It's not about drowning in your thoughts. It's more like checking in with yourself. It's like saying, okay, what's happening in my mind right now, and how can I guide it in a better direction? It's awareness, not worry. And here's the best part. Metacognition is a skill you can practice. You don't need to be born with it. You can train your mind to do it just like you train your body at the gym. The more you practice, the more control you'll have over your learning, your emotions, and your choices. You'll find yourself becoming more focused, more intentional, and even more confident. So next time you feel stuck, maybe you're struggling with a task or trying to learn something new, or even just calming your busy mind, try this. Step outside of your thoughts for a moment. Ask yourself, What's going on in my mind right now? That one little question could be the start of something powerful. So, let's bring it all together. What exactly is metacognition? At its simplest, metacognition just means thinking about your thinking. It's a big word, but the idea is actually very easy. Think of your brain as a computer. Metacognition is like special software that lets you watch how the computer works. It's the ability to notice, understand, and guide how you learn, solve problems, and make decisions. When you practice metacognition, you're no longer just on autopilot. Instead of doing things automatically, you stop and ask questions like, how am I doing this? Is this method helping me? Could I try another way? This awareness puts you in the driver's seat. For example, maybe you realize you remember new English words better when you read them quietly rather than when you listen to them. Once you know that, you can make smarter choices about how you study. Metacognition also helps you before, during, and after any task. Before you start, you can plan. What steps should I take? What problems might I face? During the task, you can monitor. Am I making progress? Do I need to adjust my strategy? After the task, you can reflect. What worked well? What could I try differently next time? This simple cycle, plan, monitor, reflect, is really the heart of metacognition. And why does it matter? Because it makes your learning so much more effective. When you understand your own mind, you can fix mistakes, improve your skills, and grow your confidence. You stop relying only on teachers or instructions, and you start making smart choices for yourself. Metacognition is not something only special people have. It's not magic. It's a mindset, a habit that you can develop. Every time you ask yourself questions, reflect on your learning, or experiment with a new method, you are training your brain to become more aware. And as you practice, you'll notice the benefits not only in your English learning, but also in solving problems, making decisions, and handling life's challenges. In short, metacognition is like being your own mental coach. Instead of just running through life without noticing, you step back, watch yourself, and guide yourself toward better growth. And once you start practicing metacognition, something amazing happens. Learning becomes easier, more interesting, and much more rewarding. But you might be wondering, why is metacognition so important? Now that we know metacognition means thinking about your thinking, let's talk about why it really matters. You may be asking yourself, okay, this sounds interesting, but how does it actually help me in my life? That's a very good question. The truth is, metacognition is one of the most powerful tools you can have for learning, for making good decisions, and even for personal growth. And it's not just for students or scientists. It's something useful for everyone, every single day. Let's think about a common situation. Have you ever studied really hard for a test, but felt like nothing was going into your brain? Maybe you read the same page again and again, but later, you couldn't remember anything. Or maybe you've tried learning English before. You listened to podcasts, you read books, you memorized vocabulary lists, but your speaking still didn't improve. That's where metacognition can help. Instead of just pushing harder and harder, you stop for a moment and ask, is this actually working for me? And sometimes the answer is no. But that's not failure. That's information. Maybe you realize you remember new words better when you actually use them in real conversations, or when you teach them to someone else, rather than just writing them down. When you notice that you can change your strategy, that's metacognition. It saves you time, energy, and frustration. Metacognition is also powerful in stressful situations, like giving a presentation or speaking in public. Almost everyone feels nervous before speaking, even in their own language. And those nervous feelings usually come from thoughts like, what if I make a mistake? What if people laugh at me? Now, if you're not aware of those thoughts, they can control you. But if you use metacognition, you notice them. You pause and ask, is this thought really true? What's the worst that could actually happen? When you do that, you start to take back control. You calm your mind. You perform better. You speak with more confidence. And it doesn't stop there. Metacognition also helps with conflicts and emotional situations. We've all had disagreements with friends, with family, maybe even at work. In those moments, it's so easy to react too quickly, to say something you regret, or to shut down completely. But metacognition gives you space. Just a few seconds of space can change everything. Instead of reacting automatically, you stop and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling this? What's the best way to respond? That little pause turns a reaction into a thoughtful response. It helps you choose your words more carefully and act with more understanding. That's not only smart thinking, that's emotional intelligence. And it all starts with metacognition. Now, here's something else to think about. Have you ever noticed how sometimes your own thoughts become your biggest obstacle? Maybe you've told yourself things like, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I always fail. These thoughts feel real, don't they? But here's the truth. Most of the time, they're not reality. They're just habits. They're patterns your brain has repeated so many times that you start to believe them. And this is where metacognition becomes your superpower. Because once you start noticing these thoughts, you can challenge them. You can replace them with thoughts that are more helpful, more true, and more supportive of your growth. Sometimes, the biggest problem isn't the world around us. It's the thoughts inside our own head. Many of us carry old beliefs. Thoughts like, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I always fail. These thoughts are like old songs that keep playing in the background. And if we never stop to notice them, we start believing them. But metacognition helps us pause. It gives us a chance to say, wait a second, is this really true? And that one small question can open the door to a completely new way of thinking and a completely new way of living. So, why is metacognition important? Because it helps you learn better, grow faster, become more confident, be more aware, and take more control of your life. Without metacognition, we often repeat the same mistakes again and again. Not because we're lazy, not because we're not smart, but simply because we're not paying attention to how we think. We don't notice the deeper patterns behind our actions. But when you practice metacognition regularly, something shifts. You start noticing things you never noticed before. You begin to understand yourself more deeply, your strengths, your weaknesses, your habits, your fears. You stop living on autopilot. Instead, you start living with purpose. You don't just go through life, you grow through life. And here's the best part. You don't need anything fancy to begin. You don't need a special journal or an expensive course. All you need is a few quiet minutes and the courage to ask yourself simple questions like, how did I do today? What could I have done differently? What was I thinking when I made that choice? These little questions can lead to big insights. They shine a light on your mind. And once the light is on, everything becomes clearer. You see your thoughts. You understand your actions. You grow stronger every day. That's why I say metacognition is like turning on a light inside your brain. Suddenly, you see more clearly. You act more wisely. You grow more deeply. And honestly, once you start using it, you'll wonder how you ever lived without it. Metacognition in daily life. Now that we've talked about what metacognition is and why it's important, let's bring it down to earth. Let's see how it actually shows up in your daily life. Because here's the truth. Metacognition isn't just something you do when you're studying for a test or sitting in a classroom. It's something that can help you in everyday decisions, in your habits, and even in your emotions. And once you start noticing it, you'll realize it's everywhere. Let's start with one struggle almost everyone knows too well: procrastination. Have you ever had a task to do? Something small, like replying to an email, cleaning your room, or studying for a test, but instead of doing it, you found yourself scrolling on your phone, watching videos, or doing everything else except that one thing. That's procrastination. Now, a lot of people think procrastination means laziness, but actually it's often something deeper. Sometimes it's because the task feels boring. Other times, it's because we're afraid. Afraid we won't do it perfectly. Afraid we'll fail. In fact, procrastination is often perfectionism in disguise. We delay because we want to do something perfectly. And if we're not sure we can, we don't start at all. But here's where metacognition helps. It gives you the power to pause and ask yourself, why am I putting this off? When you notice the thought behind your action, you can change it. You can say, okay, I'm afraid of doing this wrong, but doing something is better than doing nothing. That small shift, that awareness, is metacognition in action. Have you ever been lying in bed at night, trying to sleep, but your mind just won't stop? Maybe you keep thinking about something that happened during the day. Perhaps you said something awkward in a conversation, or maybe you're worried about what someone thinks of you. Suddenly, your brain starts spinning. 100 little what-ifs show up. What if they misunderstood me? What if I made a mistake? What if I look stupid? Sound familiar? It happens to all of us. That's what people often call overthinking. But here's the good news. This is the perfect moment to use metacognition. Instead of letting your thoughts spin out of control, you can stop for a second and ask yourself a simple question. Is this thought helping me? If the thought is only making you feel worse, and it's not solving anything, maybe it's time to let it go. You can shift your mindset by reminding yourself, I did my best and that's enough. One small moment doesn't define who I am. That little bit of self-awareness doesn't erase overthinking completely, but it does help you step back. It helps you stop the cycle before it grows too big. Let me share a personal story with you. Something small but powerful. A few months ago, I was preparing a podcast episode. I wanted it to be helpful, inspiring, and easy to follow. I wrote down some ideas, but then I kept deleting my notes and rewriting them again and again. Inside my head, I kept saying, this isn't good enough. It doesn't sound right. It's not perfect yet. I spent hours like that, trying to fix every tiny detail. And then I realized I wasn't really writing anymore. I was stuck in perfectionism. That's when I used metacognition. I caught myself and asked, wait, what am I doing right now? Why am I being so hard on myself? And the answer became clear. I was afraid. Afraid that people wouldn't like it. Afraid it wouldn't be perfect. But once I said that truth out loud, I felt lighter. I reminded myself, it's okay to improve, but it's also okay to start messy. Progress is better than perfection. And you know what? That small shift in thinking helped me finish the episode. And even if it wasn't 100% perfect, I was proud of it. Because at the end of the day, progress matters more than perfection. Metacognition doesn't just help with overthinking or perfectionism. It also helps with planning and consistency. Think about this. Maybe you've tried to start a new habit. Waking up early, going to the gym, studying English for 30 minutes a day. At first, you're excited. You feel motivated. You tell yourself, this time I'll do it. But then life gets busy. You skip one day, then 2 days. And before you know it, the habit is gone. It's easy to feel disappointed in yourself when that happens. Some people even give up completely. But here's where metacognition makes a difference. Instead of blaming yourself, you stop and ask, why did I stop? What got in my way? Maybe you were too tired at night. Maybe your plan wasn't realistic. Maybe you didn't have reminders or support. The point is not to judge yourself. The point is to understand yourself. Once you know what stopped you, you can make changes. You might decide to study in the morning instead of the evening. Or you might set smaller goals that are easier to stick to. And most importantly, you learn that consistency doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean never missing a day. It means coming back again and again, even after you fall off track. That's the real key to building habits. Finally, let's talk about one more powerful way to practice metacognition every day: journaling. Now, some people think journaling is only for writers or creative people. But actually, it's for anyone who wants to understand themselves better. When you write about your day, your feelings, your thoughts, your experiences, you begin to see patterns. You notice what makes you stressed. You notice what gives you energy. You start to understand what kind of mindset you usually carry. Is it mostly positive? Mostly negative? Or maybe a mix of both? Once you see your patterns, you can ask yourself better questions. What worked well today? What do I want to change tomorrow? What thoughts are lifting me up? What thoughts are bringing me down? And the amazing thing is, journaling doesn't need to take a long time. Even just 5 minutes a day can make a big difference in how clearly you see yourself. Journaling is like holding up a mirror, not to your face, but to your mind. And once you see what's really happening in your thoughts, you can guide yourself to a better place. So, metacognition in daily life isn't about being perfect or overthinking every little thing. It's not about analyzing every thought like a scientist. Instead, it's about building a simple habit of self-awareness. It's about learning to notice your thoughts, reflect on them, and then guide them in a healthier direction. Whether you're dealing with procrastination, overthinking, perfectionism, or just trying to plan better, you always have a choice. You can pause for a moment, reflect on what's going on inside your mind, and then move forward with more clarity. That's how real growth happens. Not by suddenly changing everything overnight, but by becoming just a little more aware and a little more mindful every single day. The two main parts of metacognition. So far, we've talked about what metacognition is, why it matters, and how it can help in daily life. Now, let's go one step deeper. Don't worry, it's not too technical. Just enough to understand how this process works inside your mind. Metacognition has two main parts: metacognitive knowledge, metacognitive regulation. These words might sound a little complicated, but once you hear the meanings, you'll realize something surprising. You're already using both of them in different parts of your life. 1. Metacognitive knowledge. Metacognitive knowledge simply means what you know about your own thinking. It's the part of metacognition that involves awareness. It's about noticing and understanding things like how you learn best, what you usually struggle with, and what kinds of strategies actually help you. For example, maybe you've realized that you learn better when you say things out loud instead of just reading silently. Or maybe you've noticed that when you're tired or stressed, it's harder for you to stay focused. That kind of awareness, Knowing your strengths and weaknesses when it comes to thinking and learning is metacognitive knowledge. It also includes understanding the nature of different tasks. For example, writing an essay is not the same as preparing for a speaking test. Each one requires a different approach. Or think about learning vocabulary. Maybe you already know that just memorizing words in a list doesn't help much. Instead, you remember them better when you connect the new words to real-life examples or when you use them in full sentences. That's metacognitive knowledge, understanding your own mind and the best methods for you. Let's make this super simple with an example. Imagine you're trying to learn 20 new English words. A person with strong metacognitive knowledge will stop and think, what's the best way for me to remember these words? They might decide, I'll group them into categories like food, travel, or work. That helps me remember faster. Or, I'll write each word in a sentence because then I'll see how it works in real conversation. Those small choices come from knowing yourself and how your memory works. 2. Metacognitive regulation. Now, let's talk about the second part. Metacognitive regulation. If metacognitive knowledge is about knowing how you think, then metacognitive regulation is about managing your thinking. It's the more active side of metacognition. It's about using what you know to actually guide your learning, solve problems, and keep yourself on track. This includes things like planning, deciding how you're going to approach a task, monitoring, checking in on yourself while you're doing the task, adjusting, making changes if something isn't working. In short, it's about being in control of your mental process. Let's go back to our vocabulary example. You've already decided, based on your knowledge, that you learn best when you write words in full sentences. That's metacognitive knowledge. But what happens next is metacognitive regulation. For example, you make a plan. I'll write 3 sentences for each new word. While studying, you notice, wait, I'm just copying the sentences without really thinking. This isn't working. Then you adjust. I'll slow down and try making my own sentences instead. That's regulation. You're not just learning passively, you're steering the process, like the driver of a car. So to put it simply, knowledge is knowing how your mind works. Regulation is using that knowledge to guide yourself. When you put both together, you become a more effective learner, a clearer thinker, and a better problem solver in daily life. So, to sum it up, metacognitive knowledge is what you know about your thinking. Metacognitive regulation is how you manage that thinking. The two always work together. First, you become aware of how your brain works. Then, you use that awareness to plan smarter, make better choices, and grow faster. It's like being the driver of your own mind. Instead of just letting it run on autopilot, you choose the direction, you adjust the speed, and you decide when to take a new route. And the best part? Both knowledge and regulation can be learned and improved. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to start asking yourself thoughtful questions like, what works best for me? What doesn't work? What can I try differently next time? The more you practice, the more natural it becomes. Over time, metacognition stops feeling like an extra step and becomes part of your everyday thinking. So, next time you sit down to learn something new, face a challenge, or solve a problem, pause for a moment. Ask yourself what you already know about your own thinking, and then guide yourself with that knowledge. That's the real power of metacognition. Common barriers to metacognition. Now, here's the thing. If metacognition is so powerful, why doesn't everyone use it all the time? The truth is, many of us face barriers that make it harder to practice metacognition. And often, we don't even realize these barriers are there. Let's look at some of the most common ones. Autopilot thinking. Sometimes we just go through the day without stopping to reflect. We wake up, do our tasks, scroll our phones, talk to people, and go to bed, all without really noticing our thoughts. When life feels busy, reflection can feel like a luxury, but in reality, it's what keeps us from repeating the same mistakes. Fear of being wrong. Some people avoid self-reflection because they're afraid of what they'll find. Asking what went wrong can feel uncomfortable, almost like admitting failure. But the truth is, reflection isn't about blaming yourself. It's about learning and improving. Overthinking. Ironically, thinking too much can also get in the way. Instead of guiding your thoughts, you might get stuck in analyzing every detail, which leads to stress and paralysis. Metacognition is not about endless analysis. It's about clear, useful reflection that leads to action. Habits and comfort zones. Our brains like routine. If we've always studied or worked a certain way, it feels easier to keep doing that, even if it's not effective. Metacognition asks us to step back, question our habits, and sometimes try something new, which can feel uncomfortable at first. Lack of awareness. Finally, one of the biggest barriers is simply not knowing about metacognition at all. Many people have never been taught to think about their thinking. The good news is, once you learn about it, you can start practicing right away. So far, we've talked a lot about what metacognition is, why it's important, and how to use it in everyday life. But here's the truth. Sometimes it's not easy. Even if you understand how helpful self-reflection can be, there are moments when you don't do it, or you try, but something inside blocks you. That's why in this part, I want to talk about the most common barriers to metacognition, the things that make it hard to think clearly about your own thinking. 1. Self-doubt. Have you ever started learning something new, a language, a skill, or even a personal goal, and thought, I'm not smart enough for this, or I'll never get it? That inner voice is one of the biggest roadblocks. When you doubt yourself, you stop asking helpful questions like, how can I improve? And instead ask, what's wrong with me? Those two questions might sound similar, but they lead in completely different directions. One opens a path to growth, the other shuts it down. 2. Negative self-talk. Closely tied to self-doubt is the way we talk to ourselves. Phrases like, I always mess things up, or why do I even try, can become automatic without us noticing. But this kind of talk makes it almost impossible to reflect honestly. If you already believe you'll fail, every mistake looks like proof that you're not good enough. In reality, mistakes are just part of learning. The way we speak to ourselves shapes the way we think. 3. Fear of failure. This barrier is sneaky because it often hides behind other excuses. Maybe you delay starting something, telling yourself, I'll do it next week, or I'll try when I'm ready. But deep down, the real reason is fear of getting it wrong. The danger is that fear keeps you from reflecting. You don't look closely at your mistakes because you don't even give yourself permission to make them. But here's the truth. Failure isn't the enemy. It's feedback. It's a message that says, this method didn't work. Try another way. That's exactly what metacognition helps us do. 4. Cultural and educational influences. Sometimes the barrier isn't inside you. It comes from the world around you. In some schools and cultures, students are encouraged to memorize, follow instructions, and get the right answer, but not to question their own thinking. If you ask too many questions, you might be told you're being difficult. If you share your reflections, you might feel judged. Over time, this teaches people that reflection is unnecessary or even wrong. But metacognition is about exactly the opposite. slowing down, becoming aware, and choosing how you respond. 5. Autopilot thinking. Another barrier is simply moving through life on autopilot. You go through the motions, study, work, talk to people, without ever pausing to ask, how well is this working for me? Reflection takes a conscious pause, and in a busy world, it can feel like we don't have time. But without that pause, it's easy to repeat the same mistakes again and again. 6. Overthinking. Ironically, one of the barriers to metacognition is thinking too much. Instead of guiding your thoughts, you may get stuck analyzing every detail, which leads to stress and paralysis. True metacognition isn't endless analysis. It's focused reflection that helps you make clear choices and take action. 7. Comfort zones and habits. Finally, our brains love routine. If you've always studied, worked, or solved problems in a certain way, it feels easier to keep doing that, even if it's not effective. Metacognition challenges you to step back and ask, is this the best way for me? Trying something new can feel uncomfortable at first, but it's often the key to growth. Since you're now moving into how to practice metacognition, it might help to make the transition sharper. Highlight that now we're shifting from problems to solutions. Offer concrete, step-by-step practices, daily reflection, journaling, asking metacognitive questions, self-checklists, teaching others, etc. Keep it simple and doable so learners don't feel overwhelmed. Here's a polished continuation building on your draft. So yes, there are real barriers to metacognition: self-doubt, negative self-talk, fear of failure, cultural silence, even constant distraction. But perhaps the biggest barrier of all is believing that change is impossible. And that's not true. Change is always possible, especially when you begin by changing the way you think about your thinking. How to practice metacognition. Now that we've explored what metacognition is, why it matters, and what can sometimes get in the way, let's talk about something even more practical: how to actually practice it. Metacognition isn't just a theory. It's a skill. And like any skill, the more you practice, the better you get. You don't need a textbook or a teacher to begin. What you really need is curiosity, a little bit of time, and a willingness to look closely at your own learning and decision-making. Here are a few simple ways to start. 1. Daily pauses for reflection. Take just a few minutes each day to pause and ask, what went well today? What didn't work as I expected? What can I try differently tomorrow? These small check-ins build awareness and turn reflection into a natural habit. 2. Ask metacognitive questions. Before, during, and after a task, ask yourself questions like, before, what's my goal? How will I approach this? During, is this strategy working, or do I need to adjust? After, what did I learn? What can I do better next time? 3. Keep a learning journal. Writing things down makes your thinking visible. Note what strategies you used, how you felt, and what results you saw. Over time, this creates a record of your growth that you can look back on. 4. Teach or explain to someone else. One of the best ways to understand your own thinking is to explain it. When you teach an idea, you notice what you understand clearly and where you're still confused. 5. Build feedback loops. Ask for feedback from a teacher, mentor, or even a friend. Then reflect. Do I agree? What can I apply? Feedback paired with self-reflection makes your metacognition stronger. 6. Use if-then plans. When you notice a repeated challenge, make a simple plan. For example, if I get distracted while studying, then I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and put my phone away. This helps you turn reflection into action. Here are a few suggestions to make it even stronger and more structured, while keeping the flow you already have. 1. Highlight the pattern of before, during, after. You're already describing it, but you can make it clearer. Before a task, planning ahead. What's my goal? How will I do it? During a task, self-monitoring. Is this working? How do I feel right now? After a task, reflection. What went well? What can I change next time? Framing it this way gives learners a simple routine to follow anywhere, anytime. 2. Tighten some phrases. For example, growth starts when we stop running on autopilot and start living with awareness. This could be a standout line, almost like a motto. You could even repeat or emphasize it later. These questions don't change the past, but they prepare you for a better future. Very strong ending. You might pull it out as a mini conclusion before moving to the next method. 3. Add a quick tools snapshot. After describing the techniques, you could give a short recap box like, metacognitive tools you can try today. Journaling. Write 1 to 2 sentences at the end of your day. Mental check-ins. Pause and ask, is this working? Better questions. Swap self-criticism for curiosity. Self-monitoring. Notice your thoughts while in action. Planning ahead. Take 1 minute before starting. This way, your audience can see at a glance what to try. A few ideas to polish and strengthen it further. 1. Smooth the transition. Right now, you end the habit section with, remember, you are not just a learner. You are also your own guide. And the better you understand your thinking, the more power you have to shape your future. That's a powerful line. To make the transition cleaner, you could add a short bridge. And that's where metacognition goes beyond learning. It doesn't just help you study better, it helps you live better. Let's look at how this skill shapes your personal growth. 2. Clarify the 3 dimensions. You've introduced mindfulness, confidence, resilience. That's a fantastic trio, but you can make it clearer with a guiding sentence like, metacognition supports 3 qualities that matter in every part of life: mindfulness, confidence, and resilience. This primes the reader/listener for what's coming. 3. Polish key lines for impact. Some sentences are already strong but could shine more with small tweaks. You stop living on autopilot and begin living with more awareness. Maybe emphasize, that's the shift from autopilot to awareness. Real confidence doesn't come from always getting things right. It comes from understanding your process. This is excellent. You could slow it down with a pause if spoken aloud, almost like a punchline. Confidence is not about perfection. It's about progress. This is quotable. Could be pulled out as a key takeaway. 4. Make resilience build naturally. You set it up well. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. That's where resilience comes in. You might expand slightly. When something goes wrong, metacognition helps you step back, reflect, and adjust instead of giving up. You stop seeing failure as a dead end and start seeing it as feedback. That's resilience in action. Here's how you could refine it to make the close even tighter, clearer, and more memorable. Strengths in your draft. Resilience reframed beautifully. Not never falling, but knowing how to get back up. That's powerful and quotable. Curiosity as the core. You repeatedly emphasize curiosity instead of perfection, which makes the message encouraging instead of intimidating. Gentle reflection. The breathing and recognition part feels calming and validating for the listener. Suggestions for polishing. Make curiosity the golden thread. You repeat it near the end, but you could make it the final anchor line the listener walks away with. Something like, perfection isn't the goal. Curiosity is. Because curiosity leads to reflection, and reflection leads to growth. Tighten the recap. Your recap is strong but a little long. You might shorten it to a crisp 3-part reminder. What metacognition is, thinking about thinking. How it helps learning, study smarter, adapt. How it shapes life, mindfulness, confidence, resilience. End with a strong call to action. Right now, you end with obstacles. You could instead loop back to start small, start today, to give the listener a clear next step. Example. So, as you go through your day, take just one pause. Ask one curious question about. Here's what really works well. Universal empathy, opening with "these are all normal human experiences," reassures the listener they're not alone. Concrete practices. You remind them of the practical steps, reflecting, journaling, pausing, so the advice feels doable. Reflective questions. Inviting them to carry questions forward makes it interactive and personal. Gratitude plus encouragement. The thank you and reassurance are warm and motivating. Final sign-off. Take care of your mind, stay curious, and keep thinking about your thinking is a memorable closing line. Small polishes to strengthen flow. Tighten repetition, a few phrases repeat. Small changes are powerful, not perfect, just honest, which is great for emphasis but could be trimmed slightly so the ending doesn't feel too long. Sharpen the final. Note the very last line feels like it trails off. You're doing better than you. You could turn that into a strong, uplifting finish. Example. You're doing better than you think. Keep going. Or remember, growth takes time, and you're already on the path. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your focus. And thank you for your openness. These topics aren't always easy, but your willingness to listen, to learn, and to grow in English and in life is truly inspiring. I hope today's episode helped you feel a little more in control of your thoughts, more aware of your process, and more connected to your own journey. If you found something useful here, remember you can always come back, listen again, and even share this with someone who might need it, too. I'll be here next time with another topic to help you grow not only your language skills, but also your life skills. Until then, take care of your mind, stay curious, and keep thinking about your thinking. And most importantly, remember this. You are already doing better than you realize. Every time you pause, every time you reflect, every time you ask yourself a thoughtful question, you are making progress. Growth doesn't happen all at once. It happens step by step, moment by moment, choice by choice. So be patient with yourself, trust the process, and know that with each small effort, you are moving forward. You're learning, you're growing, and you're becoming stronger every single day. Keep going, you're doing better than you think.